One of the most common sentiments I hear from people who struggle with clutter is that they feel hopeless and that there's no point in even trying anymore because things never seem to get better no matter what they do. They feel like they don't even have the ability to get their home under control and truly believe that this is something that they simply cannot change. Now, on this channel, we talk a great deal about the many different root causes of clutter, which can range anywhere from having a busy and chaotic lifestyle to past trauma, to mental health issues like depression or anxiety, having difficulty making decisions, having a fear of lack, having ADHD, all the way to having an emotional attachment to our items. But whatever the underlying cause of our clutter is, if we struggle with the issue for long enough and if we repeatedly experience an inner feeling of failure or lack of control, it can actually lead us into a psychological state called learned helplessness. This is when we genuinely feel like we are unable to control a situation even when we have the ability to do so. And I know sometimes we can have physical or health barriers to cleaning our clutter that can make it seem difficult, if not impossible, without assistance. But when we struggle with learned helplessness, even when we don't have a physical issue, it can still feel impossible, which I know many of you have said that you have experienced. So today I want to talk about how we can break through this state so that we can finally feel like we are in control of our home and actually be able to make progress. But first, if you're new here, my name's Nina. I help people to declutter their minds and their homes using practical applications of psychology. So if that is a type of support that you may find beneficial, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. But I want to go ahead and jump right in. And I want to start by talking about a concept that we often use when discussing the struggle that many people with ADHD experience when trying to initiate a task, even though many of you out there are neurotypical, because I definitely think it still applies. And we call this concept the wall of awful. It's an emotional barrier we can face when we are trying to accomplish something that we've already had a series of negative experiences with. This wall gets built brick by feelings of overwhelm, anxiety, fear of failure, stress, and self-doubt, and can make it extremely difficult to even get started with cleaning and decluttering, let alone actually finish these tasks. Of course, we can feel helpless when there is this invisible wall of awful standing in front of us, making us feel like the task is impossible. So if this is what you have been experiencing, please take a moment and have some self-compassion, because this is not an easy thing to face, but it is something that we can overcome. No matter how hopeless we feel, meaningful change is still possible. So how do we do this? How do we break through this wall of awful and finally be able to start cleaning and decluttering? Well, the very first thing that we need to do is to change our mindset. We need to start by rewriting our internal story and reminding ourselves that we are capable and that the task itself is actually possible. We may not feel that way yet, but that is actually the reality. We need to establish that we are starting on a fresh page and that our previous attempts to accomplish this task are irrelevant. They did not count because this is really the first time that we are coming at it with a helpful attitude and a helpful mindset, as opposed to being completely self-sabotaged by our wall of awful. Now, the second thing that we can do is to add a spoonful of sugar. Not literally, of course, but let's face it, just the thought of cleaning and decluttering can give us a bad feeling, so we have to work to change that. The spoonful of sugar principle is a metaphor for making something more appealing by adding something enjoyable to it. It's often used to describe the trick that parents use to get their kids to take their medicine, but we can use this same idea to help change our emotional reaction to cleaning and decluttering by making it a little bit more fun, or at least a little less miserable. So we can turn on a podcast or a video or listen to some music or ask a friend or family member to help us with this process, or even reward ourselves when we complete a task by doing something that we enjoy afterwards. The next thing to remember is to start small and to have realistic goals. Please do not feel like you need to clean or declutter your entire house all at once. It's likely not even possible. And if it's something that you attempted to do in the past, it could be one of the reasons why you got so overwhelmed. It's better to start small with a little area or a box or a singular bin. And if you have absolutely no idea where to get started, I do have a video that I recently made about the top 3 places that I think are best to start with. I will go ahead and link that down in the description box below, but whatever you decide on, just make sure that it is actually manageable. Remember that one of the biggest things that we are working on here is developing self-trust, and that's why it's so important that we are setting goals for ourselves that we are certain we can accomplish within the time frame that we give ourselves. The 4th thing that's helpful is to break down large tasks into smaller ones. A lot of times we feel like giving up even before we really get started because we are completely overwhelmed by even the thought of a large task like decluttering the entire kitchen. But if we break that down into smaller, more manageable tasks like clearing off one countertop or the stovetop or sorting through one singular cabinet, we then have a manageable, reachable goal that doesn't completely stress us out. Now, the 5th thing to remember is to take breaks. I cannot say this enough. We have to take breaks, and we also have to make sure that we are having awareness of how we are doing emotionally during this process, especially if we've been feeling anxious and overwhelmed. So we want to make sure that we are getting up and moving around every 20 to 30 minutes and that we are checking in with ourselves. And don't feel like you need to devote a huge chunk of time to this every single day. If we can only do 10 minutes, then that is what we can do. With time, we are going to build up tolerance and emotional endurance. So we want to be careful that we are not pushing ourselves beyond our limits. We just want to be proud of ourselves that we worked on it. In fact, in another recent video, I talked about decluttering using the 2-minute rule, which I think is a wonderful way to get started. So I will go ahead and link that down in the description box below as well. But we just have to remember that even small steps are progress and that even a small amount of effort can lead to meaningful change. And if we find that as we are working to break through our wall of awful, that negative thoughts or our old mindset try to creep back in, we have to make sure that we are challenging these thoughts and that we reaffirm ourselves. And believe it or not, many people have found that visualizing themselves successfully completing these tasks and then feeling good about their accomplishments actually helps them with this process. Remember, we do have the capacity to adapt and to change any aspect of our life that we want to. It's never too late to make meaningful change, but we do need to take action. So make sure that every day you are taking tiny little steps towards this goal and just be persistent. With each small success, we're going to notice that the bricks of our wall of awful begin to naturally fall away, and we will start to gain self-trust and self-confidence in the process. And the other amazing thing that starts to happen is that all these negative emotions that we used to feel, like stress and anxiety, even thinking about these tasks, also start to shrink, and we will find that the task itself does become a lot more manageable. We do have to remember, however, to be patient and loving with ourselves during this process because it is a big change and it's probably something that has made you feel uncomfortable for a long time. So just remember to be there for yourself. I also have an entire playlist of support on this topic. I will go ahead and link it down in the description box below so you have that resource. As always, I truly hope that you found today's video to be helpful and insightful. If you did, please like it, share it, and definitely become a subscriber. If you aren't one already, I would absolutely love it if you stayed connected. I want to thank you so much for spending time with me today, and I hope the rest of your day is extraordinary.